we all understand here, I'm preaching to the converted, that crime and badness is not equal over time and space. It is focused in areas or groups of people. And for that reason, you need to be precise in relation to how you focus your intervention. So if you want to prevent violence happening to police officers, you can, and you will hear later from Nathan, how you can forecast who's the person who's most likely to get assaulted. If you are interested in saying, you know, I want to root out corruption or misogyny, and Maggie's going to speak to us a bit about Borg in a bit, there's no point shouting at your whole organisation, don't be sexist, because you probably know that in your organisation, out of 2,000 people, there's 100 people who you really want to focus on. And how can you be precise and surgical in your intervention? And I think evidence-based policing is the best way of doing that, because we use data and we use science to understand where we focus. Data science, I think, is a really important pillar associated with policing. And when you compare sort of data-driven strategies against anecdote and professional expertise, normally it's the data-driven approaches that beat the professional expertise. They call it clinical versus actuarial. So you ask a cop, you know, who's my 100 worst police officers, or who's my 100 worst burglars, or who's my 100 worst Borg offenders. They'll give you an opinion, but it's not all necessarily right. And an evidence-based approach helps us to do that. And Peter Nehru and Larry Sherman, both who are speaking over the next 2 days, they came up with this concept of the triple T. And it works quite nicely with evidence-based policing. How do you target your intervention appropriately? And a lot of today you'll hear about how you focus and target in on particular groups of people or spaces. But then really importantly, when I've got my 100 officers who are most likely to be subject to violence, or my 100 sexist officers, or my 100 violent offenders, or my 100 stalkers, what are you going to do? Or my 100 DA repeat victims? And again, it's an area that's full of ideology and ideas, and evidence-based policing just sort of cuts through that. So today and tomorrow you'll hear a lot about precision. I'd like to thank our partners, YEF, they're coming later. They're a huge supporter of Society of Evidence-Based Policing. They're sponsoring us, the Youth Endowment Fund, very much focused on ending youth violence through an evidence-based approach. College of Policing always partner well with SEBP. Brilliant work they do. Rachel's coming up next. The What Works Centre for Crime is based here at the College of Policing, evidence-based champions, and there's a real synergy between what the college does and what SEBP does. And they've been integral in organising this conference, providing the venue for free, all the bookings for free, and I'm eternally grateful for Rachel, Neris, and the whole college team. Right, I'm going to introduce Maggie, and I was going to talk a bit about Borg, but I've run out of time. I can't help myself. But let me just throw some interesting points around Borg, because this is, as Maggie will say, is a space full of opinion and ideology. And this was a little experiment that I wanted to highlight from a DS called Christina Carr, working with a professor called Sarah Bennett. And this was sex offence training, and they did a 2 weeks RASO course for individuals, but they did it in an evidence-based way. And they said, okay, let's track for 4 years outcomes associated with this sex offence course. And here you have solved rates for serious sexual offences, those people who've been on the course over 4 years afterwards, to those who didn't go on the course. And if any of you are interested in the happy sheets and course, forget those. Here's the real impact. And what I found really interesting is when they looked at the genders of the police officers associated with the training courses, the biggest difference in the solved rate, as you can see, is it affected the female population of police officer investigators so much more than the male population of investigators. So it's interesting when we talk around the evidence of what's affected. Sometimes an evidence-based approach can be really interesting in digging into some of these aspects. I was going to talk about RVR as well, and I was going to talk about a number of other aspects, but I'll leave that to speakers a bit later. So it's a great privilege for me to introduce Maggie. Maggie is the new DCC for the College of Policing and also the lead for violence against women and girls. Maggie, thank you.